And I think that first of all, we should ask a basic question. What kind of co-production we are talking about? Because in my opinion, there are two principal kinds of co-production. One is about money. When producers come to the idea that they have to involve partners from several countries in order to get the money for their film. The other kind of co-production is the one when the international collaboration means something, is the integral part of the project, requires talent, requires location, requires mind of people from different countries to put together something which will be different, which will be bigger than the prospective product coming from just one country. So if we divide, if we distinguish these two kinds of co-production, of course, the much more interesting for us is the second one.
In that early characterization, I've done both kinds of films. I have a film that's shooting at the moment, which is a very natural co-production because it's a true story which has Spanish characters and French characters, and it's being shot in English in Spain. You know, the Euro-pudding nightmare is right here, back of my head. But I hope that, you know, we have worked out how to do that, and part of that is about deciding on what the kind of truth of how you're going to make all those characters behave in relation to each other, how you distinguish between them. And one of the things that's incredibly important there is the reason that I was brought in was to make what's basically a Spanish-funded film, an international film, because the Spanish market is unfortunately, you know, very small and tight. And they know that if they make an English language film, they have a much better chance. They have a better chance of getting big stars to be in the movie, which helps, and of it reaching a wider audience.
There's a lot of co-production between Israeli films and European and American investors. I think the European market is starting to get interested at the Israeli dramas, TV dramas. At this time, two Israeli projects actually developed for the Israeli audience and the European audience, mainly French. One is located in biblical time. Basically, they're trying to do like the biblical version of Game of Thrones, which could be cool.
I'd watch that.
And the only way to do it in Israel is with European money, because basically you have to do it all, you know, with green screens and such. The other one is basically, you're talking about cultural fringe. The way European precede Israel is basically a land of camels and spies.
When films are made in India, about India, and not by Indians specifically, they portray poverty in a light, which I'm not going to say that India is not a poor country or we don't have poverty in that country. Mm-hmm. But it can give the impression that Indians themselves are desensitized to their poverty, which is not true. And I think that, I mean, we as filmmakers in India have to start doing that and portraying that, no, these are struggles that Indians face themselves. That we don't, you know, our culture doesn't tell us that we're okay with poverty. And I think when Western filmmakers come into India, I think that also they need to be sensitized to the idea that Indians themselves don't just dance around poor people. You know, we fight it, we have ideological struggles, we have a left, we have a right, we have, you know, so there's this sort of like cultural stereotyping of, you know, our ideological issues in Indian films, which I feel we need to sort of change. Mm-hmm.
If it doesn't matter whether they're wearing frocks and taking tea on the lawn, or whether they're in the tenement block, you know, shooting each other, as long as you actually care about the issue between the people, I don't think you'll suffer from cultural cringe. It's when the frocks become more important than the story, more important than what you care about is, oh, what a beautiful picture this is, and oh, look, we can sell it. You know, as soon as you're doing whatever it is, writing for the international market and going, oh, well, I'm going to sell you, you know, English tea, then you have a problem. But if English tea is part of the story because these people will never have sex because they have to have English tea, then that's okay. So I feel like I'm there to do the human nature, all the stuff that's the same, but I really need the local speciality. And I did worked for a long time on an Iraqi script with a brilliant Iraqi director, and he wanted me because he'd written a female character, and so I was doing all that, but in the end, he was so divorced from the female character, and maybe that's something very culturally specific as well, that we had to find a girl to come and talk to me, because he said, I don't know what an Iraqi woman thinks, I have no idea. So it was, again, I had to find the right person to talk to me in order to not just do really stupid things.
Do you think that there is, there was a question that maybe we shouldn't write for the international market. How do you come down on that? Do you think that there is an international market, or something that that there is a new thing? What you were talking about, the 20-year-olds in everybody's countries are completely different, and they are more the same than they were different 30 years ago. How do we write to that? How do we approach that?
Well, I'll say this, and I've actually never written anything other than for myself, and maybe 4 or 5 other people that I trust. So it's hard for me to think about it as an international market any more than it is to think about a national market. I will say this about the history, I think, of American film and television to a certain extent. This immigrant experience that you're talking about, films were done by immigrants, but what they sold was an American dream, a very kind of white Anglo-Saxon perfection that probably didn't exist. Yeah. But there were a lot of immigrants who wanted that to be true. And so when those films went all over the world, you saw them and went, wow, that's an extraordinary experience that's going on over there. I think that I hope I never start to write for a particular market. I hope I do what you were talking about, which is we only can write about people, and what they're wearing and what period they're in and what country they live in really doesn't matter, as long as the dynamic between them is as honest as you can make it.
Because ultimately, you feel that what you write, which is personal and local, also translates well internationally. So I think the more you find specificity in what you do, I think it works better for the international market. When you try to write something specifically for the international market, or as in India we say for the film festival market, I think it sort of doesn't appeal to either a domestic audience or an international audience.
With Borgia, what was interesting, and I think it was the first time this ever happened, was that we shot the series in English, and we had 2 main partners, Canal Plus and ZDF, and no American distributor when we started production. And that's unusual, I'm told, to not have an American distributor when you go into production. We eventually got Netflix, and they really stepped up to participate. But by that point, we were well into shooting it, so they had no creative involvement whatsoever. I think what's happening, if I can make a stupid generalization, I think the industry is having a slight nervous breakdown because there's so much change in the air in terms of the kinds of way content now can be put out there. And I think the big Hollywood mega corporations are still trying to figure out why they're going to spend a lot of money and how they're going to make it back or make more of it back. So I think the answer, at least to the question, may be America's more interested in co-production simply because we don't have the money we used to have to be able to be the big fish. Mm-hmm. And now we're like one of the team, and as far as I'm concerned, it's a great change.
You have different freedoms, different parameters, different expectations according to the money. And of course, that's true with co-production money too, because then you have a responsibility to, you know, several different masters. And so when you're writing for something that's a co-production, then you know, I certainly feel that responsibility. And when I look at the opportunities, and I'm working at the moment with a Chinese director, and it makes even Saket's numbers look, you know, pathetic. When you look at the Chinese audience and you go, oh my God, really? We could talk to that many people at once if you make a film that's good enough and interesting enough. And as a writer, I find that possibility very exciting. And it's not, you know, it's not, I don't mean, gosh, I might get paid a lot, although that wouldn't be bad. But I do mean reaching an audience with a good story like that is a very exciting thing. And I don't think we should be above the money in that respect.